Just going to stream us over to Facebook now. We'll have a slight delay, as there always is. Get my other screen going so we can get all our good questions in. And we are live. Welcome, Mighty Mystery fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am thrilled to be here today with a writing team, known as E.G. Scott. Liz, Greg, welcome. Tell us about your brand new book, In Case of Emergency.
Awesome. Hey, Sarah. Thank you so much for having us. I love your energy at this time in the afternoon. Yeah, so we are here talking about In Case of Emergency, which came out last Tuesday.
Yep.
It is our second book that we've written together. And Greg, do you want to maybe tell the audience a little bit about what it's about?
Okay, so the very grabbing premise of this book, which I have to give my writing partner credit for.
Thank you.
I like that.
Is
Greg, 1 point.
There we go. All right, we're keeping score now.
Okay.
It's on. So it came out of a sort of a spitballing session that she and I had together, as we often do when we're approaching, ideas for new projects, and it boiled down to what would happen if somebody who was an emergency contact for another person was asked to show up to identify that person and had never met them.
Ooh,
So
yes.
that's the distilled premise right there. And that took us in all of the directions that this book ended up going in, which was a very fun, wild, sometimes twisty ride.
Yes.
Yeah. It was even for us as we were going through it, and it was a lot of fun.
So when the book opens, we meet Charlotte Knopfler. It's a very interesting time in her life. She's a woman with a past, always a good thing to have in a thriller. She's a former neurosurgeon, and she had worked in the area of trauma in the brain, having a lot to do with her own past with trauma. And something very bad happened during that time in her life. So we now meet her. She's moved home to her childhood town. She's become an acupuncturist. She has started to get her life back together, and things are going really well for her, relatively speaking. There's some issues. And she's been in a relationship with a mysterious man named Peter, who right before the book has started has gone missing. So when she gets a phone call from the local coroner saying, we have a body, we need you to come identify, she assumes that it is her boyfriend. When she gets there, it is not. It's a woman she's never seen, a woman she can't recall. And in the process of trying to remember who this woman was, it ultimately becomes a race against the clock. The woman has been murdered and she becomes the prime suspect. So not only does she have to figure out who the woman is just for her own sanity, she needs to do it to exonerate herself from this impending suspicion from our detectives.
Right.
Oh my God, I am totally hooked already. That is fascinating, because who doesn't think about that in case of emergency person? It's so stressful. Who shall I pick? Who will answer their phone?
Right.
So I just want to say a quick welcome to all of our Mighty Mystery fans. Hi, everybody. Tell us where you're listening from today. I love to know where people are logging on from. So tell us where you're logging on from today, and tell us what questions you have. You guys know how this works. Tell us what questions you have for Liz and Greg. This is your time with these fabulous authors. So it's time to grill them up. So let them know what your questions are. While you're thinking of them, I have to share just a few of their absolutely incredible blurbs. Booklist says that In Case of Emergency builds its twisty way to a suspenseful climax. Yum, I love twisty. BuzzFeed says In Case of Emergency is a fast moving and sharp thriller that examines the roles that loneliness, trauma, and friendship play when deciding who to trust. Yes to that. Samantha Downing says In Case of Emergency begins with a phone call and unfolds into a sharply plotted, dark story packed with lies, betrayal, and so many secrets, fast-moving and clever. Wow, amazing reviews. Wendy Walker says, when a brilliant but troubled doctor is listed as the emergency contact for a woman found dead, a woman who is a complete stranger, she finds herself the prime suspect. Razor sharp narration. I love that, because narration is not always easy. And witty dialogue keeps the pages turning in this fantastic follow-up to E.G. Scott's breakout sensation, The Woman Inside. So this is your second book together. Hi, Gail. Gail says she's watching from Massachusetts. Gail, welcome, one of our top community members. So tell us how this works, this teamwork thing. How did you guys meet? How did you decide to start working together? Tell us that. Give us the inside scoop.
You want to take how we met?
Okay, so we met our first week of freshman year of college.
Oh, yay!
20 some odd years ago, we'll say.
Yeah.
And we actually, we became friends after, I think, initially Liz not exactly knowing sure what to do with me, and then we slowly sort of like, you know,
it was like a couple of days of, you know, is this guy like a frat boy? And it turns out he was all good. We were fast friends after that. Yeah.
So, you know, initial rocky start, but really dove right into it. And
was your first clue that he was crushing beer cans on his head, or, you know, what was?
It was the beer helmet.
Yes.
It was the beer helmet.
We should say that we went to an undergrad theater program. And it's a wonderful program at Marymount Manhattan College. They've got an incredible dance and theater program. But amongst all of the musical theater students and dancers, Greg kind of like stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So I think I referred to you as the Jeremy Piven of Marymount, because Jeremy Piven was always playing that role around the time of the like late 90s.
Yeah, exactly. That made sense.
So we started out, we were actors undergrad. And then we really started to realize like how much we had in common as far as tastes in books and movies.
Right.
And we were kind of secret writers. We were both doing writing in college. And then after we graduated, we, you know, stayed really good friends and started to share each other's writing and be early readers.
Yeah. And editors, and at various points we were in writers groups separately. We were in a writers group together at one point with a small handful of other writers that we knew and had, you know, whose like work we liked. So we had worked together. We had known each other before we worked together, and then we'd worked together sort of informally before we got to the point where we were sitting down to really write a book together.
And we kind of did that thing that I think a lot of friends do, where they say like, oh, that's a great idea, we should do something with that. Right. And then because of life or, you know, lack of motivation or whatever, you don't actually follow through.
Right.
And we did that for like about, you know, 2 decades. And then the timing, the circumstances in our lives, there was a real moment where it was like, okay, we're going to do this now. We're going to collaborate on a novel. And that kicked off how we actually technically write. Right. And that was, we were out one night having drinks and dinner, as we had kind of once a week our entire friendship. And I had just gone through a really painful breakup, and I was really questioning trust and breakdown in communication, and what happens when someone you thought you knew really well is not who they were at all. And Greg had gone through some trauma as well.
So my dad had passed away after a long bout with cancer. So it was, you know, the year or so leading up to between his diagnosis and him actually passing on, where you have a lot of emotion and you're trying to kind of do what you can with that, and you're trying to kind of, I don't know, have closure or whatever that actually looks like. And then of course you're dealing with the aftermath of that after the person's gone. And so there's a lot of sort of trauma. There's a lot of, I think, grief, a lot of anger, a lot of things that really need a channel somehow, as opposed to just sitting on. So I think in our shared desire to sort of process all of this energy we had and this grief coming out of separate things, but around the same time, it seemed like, you know, this was as good a time as we were going to get to actually sit down and do that thing that we had been talking about and filing ideas away for, you know, a long time.
So once we kind of both agreed, like, let's do this, we came up with the concept, we came up with some of the characters. I went home that night, wrote the first chapter of our first book in the character's voice, sent it to Greg, he read it and responded in the voice of his character. And that begun what we now use as kind of our like primary mode of writing. We both write first person POV, we split up the characters, and we volley them back and forth. Right. So we don't outline in the traditional sense in the way other writing duos do. We really approach it as an improvisational exercise. And we do it because it's really fun and it's great to like stump the other person, you know. in mysteries and thrillers, that's my favorite part, is being a mystery and thriller reader, is what's going to happen next. And this is kind of like Lifetime.
Yep.
So if Greg kicks me a chapter and I'm like, oh my God, what is going to happen next? It's on me to figure it out.
Yeah.
Ooh, I am liking what I am hearing. This is so cool. We have a couple questions from the audience. I want to get right over to them. So Catherine, welcome, also one of our top community members, and she always has the best questions, and already she is proving that yet again today. She says, congratulations on the new release, In Case of Emergency is very good. She says, Greg, she's so sorry for your loss. We all are. I've also lost a parent to cancer, and so I just want to say I'm so sorry. And Catherine, thank you for sharing your condolences with Greg. She would like to know, and I think you started to touch on this, what is your writing process, and what was the initial idea that began this book? Why did you think about this In Case of Emergency stranger thing?
Well, I think this also is, we pull a lot from our real lives. And this had been a question that came up also in a previous relationship where the person I was with, excuse me, came home and had gotten his driver's license updated. And he showed it to me for the picture. And I looked and I saw that I was not the emergency contact. And
Hurtful.
Yeah, it was a moment where it was like, what do we take for granted in like kind of these big life decisions? Who do we put down as our emergency contacts? It's representative of, I think, something a lot larger. And in a romantic relationship, I think it's representative of commitment. And that kind of got my wheels turning. And I think I probably, like many things, went to Greg and lamented about this. And what we usually do with things in our lives we're trying to kind of turn over is we look at like the possible dramatic tension, or how can we make this really depraved or scary?
Yeah.
So that was one piece of it. And then Charlotte, our neurosurgeon turned acupuncturist, was inspired by an acupuncturist that I actually went to, who had been in neuropharmacology and was a brilliant woman, still is a brilliant woman, who had, from what I understand, some health issues of her own, had sought acupuncture when Western medicine was not working, had such an amazing experience. So she left Western medicine, became an acupuncturist. And in the course of being in her care, I started to ask a lot of questions. So I started to read about acupuncture, which was really fascinating. And that, as writers, I think when we go down a rabbit hole of something, and you get really fascinated, it starts to set off, all of the cylinders. So I think that was what else I'm trying to think for inspiration.
I mean, there's an aspect in the book. There's an aspect of how a lot of the characters sort of interface with technology,
right?
And the sort of, I guess, the difference, sometimes the very pointed difference between relationships that happen online and interpersonal relationships sort of in the real world, right? And so that's just a thing that we've talked about for years and years, and sort of some of the pitfalls of technology, some of the opportunities that technology affords us, and sort of navigating the line between the two. And I think that ended up being a thread that was of interest to us, or had been of interest for a long time, and was something we were able to kind of work into the storyline in this one.
I love that. And we're getting some more good questions from the audience. And I'm going to get to those in one second, because I'm ready to dive into this. But I just sort of had a vision as you were telling the story, where Kathleen was saying, where Liz was saying that Kathleen is saying, hi guys. Hi, Kathleen. Liz, where you're saying that you realized that you were not the In Case of Emergency. You went to talk to your friend and writing partner, Greg, about it. And I just sort of had this vision of Greg sort of being like, come here. And he's sort of stroking your hair, but then he's also like taking notes, where he's like, he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Plot idea, person heartbroken at not being in case of emergency. Tell me more about that. And how would you feel?
Well, that's part of the fun of this. Part of the fun of having a friendship that is also a creative partnership is it's like it's a really fun example of making lemonade from lemons, right?
Yeah.
And in our case, a slightly bitter or tangy concoction. Right. I mean, we're both kind of
laced with arsenic.
Laced with arsenic,
Yes.
Exactly. Because we have a very similar I think because we have similar frames of reference and the stuff that we're drawn to as readers and as viewers and things like that. And
Right.
because we know each other so well and we have that kind of shorthand built in, and because I think we also, part of what drew us to each other as friends is we have sort of similar, we come from maybe similar family dynamics.
Mhm.
So we also understand the emotional kind of, we have a certain, I don't know, emotional shorthand as well.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of times we do have that with something, if one of us or the other is, you know, if tragedy befalls us, we are able to take that and almost like in a cathartic way, figure out with that,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and that's part of, and that's been part of the magic for our whole friendship.
Yeah.
And do you ever say, no, too soon, I'm still heartbroken, or
It's probably, too soon for us is probably a lot shorter than it might be for other people.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's a good,
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah, our too soon is pretty, it's a very tight timeline.
It's a tight timeline. You're like, move it along, Liz. We've got a deadline in 3 hours.
Build
Oh my
that
God.
bridge, now let's write about it.
Exactly. Yeah. We do a lot of emotional work in real time so that we can get to where it's going to be a fruitful tragedy.
Greg is ready to console for 45 seconds, and then
Right.
it's time to get to that typewriter, get to that computer, and start typing.
There are deadlines.
If there are deadlines, exactly.
Yeah.
Brian says he's watching from New York. Hi, Brian. Welcome. We
Hey,
love New York. He says, what do each of you do to get inspired before sitting down? Brian, you are a man after my own heart. Tell us about that. I need these secrets right now.
Do you want to answer that, or
I mean, I wish I knew. I wish I had an answer. Sometimes it's you know, washing all the dishes that I've been putting off, you know, all morning,
right.
to just give myself a repetitive task to like try and get into it where I can get myself in the chair. It's always the thing of getting in the chair and then trying to keep the momentum from, you know, yesterday when you were in the chair. And it's a very inexact science in so far as I've been able to figure out yet. But you know, sometimes I think stubbornness is like half of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I pace around my apartment many hundreds of times, and I face down on my couch.
Yep.
I do a lot of rationalizing and justifying of watching true crime and horror movies. I watch a lot of horror movies with my boyfriend, which I say is, you know, in thriller movies, which I count as work.
Yes, that's research.
We were talking a little bit before we got on live about the importance of like moving your body and exercise, especially in a pandemic. And I've actually found that if I'm not able to like actually get my butt in the chair to start writing, it's good if I like, you know, do some boxing or do like some yoga, just because I think if you start to move your body, you really can like change your mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish I should do that more. It's more of the emotional eating and watching Netflix.
Yes. Yes, Brian, thank you for the question. Liz and Greg, I'm loving these answers. I will continue my emotional eating right after this and moving my body. And Greg, to your point, I actually had read once that Einstein had most of his brilliant ideas whilst being a filing clerk at the patent office, which is super boring, obviously, just filing, because when you're doing menial tasks like filing or washing the dishes, it engages the lower part of your brain, which frees the upper part of your brain for creative thinking. So keep washing those dishes.
Yeah, seriously. Sometimes I have the other one I don't know if you guys find this as well, but in the shower.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Some of the water or something like that, because you just get into this rhythmic thing. So then it frees your brain to sort of do all the, you know.
Yeah.
Science behind that. I've read it,
but
I can't even pretend to make it up right now.
Right.
But yes, the shower is great. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
Any kind of right monotonous chores or like something that has a rhythm to it.
Right.
Yes. Exactly. And my neighbor teaches creativity at Harvard, and she said ideas are most likely to come at showering, driving, doing dishes. Again, those monotonous, repetitive details. I absolutely love that. Catherine would like to know what was the best and the worst part of writing this book? Tell us all the things.
I think the best part of writing this book was there were some moments where we started it when we were on book tour for the first book, which may factor into the worst part of writing this book, because we had a very tight deadline. So there was a lot of pressure, but the best part was we were able to do a writer in residency in Sag Harbor, where Greg is from. And so we kind of holed up in this beautiful oceanside hotel, and we would meet every day in one of our rooms and just kind of go over what we needed to accomplish. And I think we encountered some moments that like were very hard to untangle how we were going to work things out in this book, because there's a lot of suspects, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of secrets, but we would find ourselves hitting these moments where it would just come loose and we would see it and figure it out. And it's such a gratifying thing as a writer, either by yourself or in our case in a partnership, to be like, have this equation, this math equation in front of you and think, I'm never going to solve this. And then when you do, so writing in a very concentrated time, you get to have those solves a lot more frequently. So that was really fun. And it was really fun to work in one place, because we generally work in our own homes we do a shared Google Drive, or we do the phone. And that was the first time we'd ever kind of written over a period of time in the same space.
Rough physical space, Yeah, and we ended up actually, it was interesting because the first book ended up sort of, by the time we published the first book, it ended up being more or less what we had sort of written out to write, or set out to write. Whereas book two, we actually, even having had the experience of writing a book under our belt at that point, we ended up going back and revising the story and doing a lot more rewrites on the second book than we did on the first one. So that ended up being sort of a different challenge, I guess, in and of itself.
And that actually leads us right into our next question from the audience. How was this book different besides that extra rewriting? Was there, from the first one, your process of writing the first one to the second one? Or were there differences?
Well, I guess, technically. I mean, the first one, as Liz said before, we really got into it very organically in that we actually started writing. I feel like we actually each had written a few chapters, and then it started to take shape. So then we were like, okay, well, we've got to give it some sort of framework to sort of work within, right? Whereas the second one, again, I think we both fell in love with that idea that she had. Just the setup was so kind of potent. And then from there, we actually had a little more of a kind of like a framework going forward, maybe than we did in the first one. So it's sort of like we sort of, we went in two slightly different directions in terms of kind of finding the story.
And also, I think the characters in the second one are more likable. The first book, the characters, there wasn't really a likable character in the mix aside from the detectives and the pets. In the second book, I think we set out to write characters who had a little more depth, emotional depth, a little more self-awareness for sure. And that has a different effect on the writer as well. I think when you're writing characters who are more complex, you have a different relationship to the process. So I would say characters are probably the biggest difference in this book from our first one.
My beloved pet, my Pelu is barking excitedly. My co-host is barking excitedly. I'm so fascinated by this idea of working together. Do you ever have the sense of, maybe I'm doing a little more work than my partner and they need to pick up the pace? Greg, I'm looking at you. Are you ever like, come on, Greg, Liz, or?
I feel like it's the opposite as far as like the timing. Well, we just, we have book 3 we've been working on, and Greg has a screenwriting background. So he offers to do the synopsises when we're synopsi.
Oh, perfect.
So he just did like a big synopsis, which was a lot of work, and he really did the lion's share.
Much work.
That was an instance where, when we got together, I said, thank you for doing that. And I really, those moments I'm really appreciative of. And then when we're actually in the book writing process, I take a lot longer with my chapters. So Greg will turn around a chapter. He's a much more economical writer, and I overwrite. And
me too.
So Greg will turn a chapter around in like 2 days, whereas I will like stress about it for 48 hours, then I'll sit down, then I'll walk away from it. It takes me like, I would say twice as long. So I think in that sense, I feel worried that I'm holding him up. But the longer we do this, the more I think we've gotten used to each other's styles. And that's like self-pressure. That's never Greg being like, where is it?
Greg, are you ever secretly thinking that? Are you ever like, come on, Liz?
No, because the thing is, I think that in the same way that she just said that, I think that there are things that you do well that I don't necessarily. So I think I think we have sort of complementary skill sets.
Mhm.
So we balance one another out. There are things that I, dread doing that she's happily taken care of,
Like what?
like versa.
Mhm.
I mean, in terms of all the admin stuff we have to do back and forth with agents and the publisher and with, everyone. That stuff, I don't have much of a head for it. And I find for some reason, like it seems like it takes an inordinate amount of energy to do something that's
It does.
very straightforward.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, it feels for some reason I feel like that's as taxing in terms of energy as the creative stuff.
Mhm.
Oh,
So I'm always just
absolutely.
really hesitant to do that. I think you're great about you're more proactive. You're great about doing it. And even when it comes to the actual writing stuff, I feel like we have, our lenses vary slightly, but it's like she'll help me out of a jam with something I'm working on, or we'll be able to streamline part of a story. So it actually makes the whole process more efficient as it goes. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of back and forth, and thankfully one thing tends to kind of constructively aid the other.
Oh, I love that. You guys are so amazing. You're such an amazing model for friendship and for team writing. Speaking of how long it's taking, another question from the audience. Catherine wants to know, how long does it take you to write? Yeah, how long did it take you to write this book, start to finish, soup to nuts?
I think it was 7 months.
Oh my God, that's so fast. Wow.
Yeah. And again, part of it was we had this 3-week block that we basically had a writer's residency.
Mhm.
So we were able to get really the crux of the thing. At that point, we'd actually gone down one path.
Yeah,
and
we cut a bunch.
Cut a bunch out, cut a whole character out. We joke that by the time we get to like book 4, we're going to have we can just Frankenstein a whole book together.
That have
Yeah,
been stripped
like
out,
remnants of
plot lines.
storylines and things. So at some point we'll be able to just like throw together like a greatest hits book. But yeah, so but I think we figured out when we sat down it was about 7 months.
Well, and the first book was probably about 14 or 15 months. So
Right.
we wrote the second book in half the time, which is, I think, what happens with writers once you start to have book deadlines. The first book we were kind of writing on like as if.
Right.
But the
Right.
second book, we were lucky enough to have a deadline.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I love this. So one thing that I just have been wondering about since we started, you mentioned that you met your freshman year of college, which was at a theater-based college.
Mhm.
So do you ever act out the scenes? Are you ever like in your characters? Or, I mean, do you sing them out? Do you sing them out? Do you dance them out? Is it sort of like, I am feeling frustrated?
Well, I should say I was a single threat. I was not a musical theater or a dancer, so I was just an actor. So I barely sing in the shower. But what we do as far as drawing on that experience, I think we definitely with dialogue, when I'm writing dialogue, I don't know about you, I absolutely hear how it would be on stage.
Yes.
And then we have a kind of tradition now with the last 2 books where when we finish it, we sit in a room, we get a bunch of food, and we read the book out loud to each other. I'll read Greg's chapters, he'll read mine. And that can kind of get fun and dramatic. I mean, we haven't like started doing voices. I'm also terrible at accents. But we also use improv. Improv was a huge, benefit from having been undergrad theater, all of our improvisational training, because the whole idea of yes and really opens up the possibilities, I think, when you're doing pitch writing. And I think that's really where we draw. I mean, we haven't done cosplay with the detectives yet, but maybe at CrimeCon.
We will.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's a good point. That probably is in terms of the actual structural aspect of how we write. I think improv is the biggest. Taking what we learned in improv class, probably in theater school, is maybe one of the biggest sort of engines for the way we actually put a story together. So, in a fundamental way.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So when you're done, you get a bunch of food, you go in the room. Liz, you read Greg's characters chapters. Greg, you read Liz's, but you don't do the voices. You don't act them out.
No, but
you do act them out.
We don't. But that's an old sort of playwriting trick where to like in a lot of times in theater you'll have a staged reading, which is just a bunch of actors at a table.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because hearing, it's one thing to write, especially with dialogue, right? It's one thing to write something on a page, but then a lot of times if you're hearing it back, it clarifies if there's something that's kind of clunky, if there's something that doesn't really, it's not sort of, doesn't make sense for the character, or the tone is off or something like that. A lot of times just hearing that out loud, read by someone who who didn't write the line itself, can be very clarifying for the writing process or the editing process at that point.
Oh my God, I love it. And when you're reading each other's scenes or each other's chapters, are you ever like, that is not the tone, you're doing it wrong, or you just realize you need to rewrite it?
Well, I think it's really humbling to hear someone else read your words and try and be objective. So I think it's not even you're reading it wrong. I think in my experience, I can only, really speak from my experience, but I'll hear Greg read things and have a lot of realizations about my writing. I'll see words I use too much, and I write really long sentences, and so it's moments where both for the chapter itself, I'll say that's not working, but also as a writer, you start to hear like patterns.
Yes.
Which is helpful as you go on in writing. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you going to say the within?
Well, it's funny. We've actually now that we've done a couple books together, and we're working out there, we've had a couple things where I think with each book, it's like one of us, there's that one word that each of us somehow gets like in your head, and then you overuse it without realizing you're using it. And I think we have at various points with each other been like, just so you know, you got a word in there that's not, and, but, or to, and it's in
every single chapter.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like suddenly it's like you start to like do that word count for the other person again, because you have a somewhat more objective view of it.
Right.
But so that's like now we're running joke. It's like on whatever book you're working on, which one of us is going to have, like, which word are each of us going to have that we're just blindly overusing.
Right.
What's been the words?
Within.
Within was one. I remember it was just because I kept seeing it, as I was reading the things, I'm like, there's a lot of withins in here.
Yeah.
I don't remember what mine was, but you definitely called out one that I was just throwing around like, it was going out of style. So yeah, it's funny. But again, to that point of having someone who's sort of an objective reader for your stuff is invaluable in any capacity, I think, as a writer.
I would recommend writers, even if they're not in a writing partnership, if they have a partner or a family member who would be willing to read out loud, I really think it's helpful.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I think the trust that you guys have, the mutual trust, the love that you have, within your friendship, your decades-long friendship, there's nothing like that, where you feel safe enough to provide that feedback, that in yoga, ahimsa, truth with compassion, truth with kindness, and you feel safe to receive that. It's safe to give it, and it's safe to receive that. And I think I can tell that you guys have that between yourself, and it's really special. It's really cool. What's a word you'd never use? What's a word that gives you the heebie-jeebies that you just are like, Greg, do not use moist, Greg. Don't do it.
I feel like you kind of went with a very popular one for people.
It doesn't bother me. I love moist chocolate cake. I like moist chocolate chip cookies. I don't want a dry, crunchy cookie. Moist doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers a lot of people. Someone a few weeks ago, an author said puberty. She's like, I can't even say it. She was like, it's the stage between childhood and adulthood. It starts with a P. I can't even say it or I'll throw up.
I guess that's a funny word. Puberty is sort of a funny word, isn't it? Sometimes those words that have a certain like onomatopoeia quality to them,
right? Where
they sound like that thing, and maybe that thing is a little bit, dicey.
Mine, I think, is ergo.
Ergo.
When people say it, or there's kind of like the running list of pretentious words. Get back to what we were saying before, even though it's on the page, if you hear words in your head and you maybe have an association with people who say the word too much, like heretofore, henceforth,
right,
like but
also too pertaining.
Victorian era.
I was gonna say though, if it's probably those words don't have as much place in thriller and mystery unless you're doing a timepiece,
like a gothic novel or something. Yeah, sure.
What about you, Greg? What's a word that you're like, Liz, I'm gonna have to use my one. I'm gonna have to use my one no on that.
You know what word? This is more from being a reader, probably even more than being a writer, because it's something that I just feel like it ends up being, and I've done it before myself, but it's one of those things where I feel like it's just like a default word
Mm.
is popping.
Popping.
When because people talk about all the time when they're a scene where they're eating, they're popping something into their mouths. Like I swear, every time somebody's having a scene where they're eating casually, they're always popping something in their mouths, and it's just from reading it so often that I'm like, that must just be a default word for people. But
now I'm mentally going through to say,
but
have
as
I
a
written
reader-
that word lately? But I don't think
as
I
a
have.
reader, I'm like, I feel like it's just because it just seems to be the default word, so it's in everything, and it's one of those things where I just
Now everyone who's watching this is gonna
it's gonna be everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like when you're looking for a
Yeah.
like a used car, and suddenly like every
They're
car you
everywhere.
see has the sign in the window for it. Yeah.
And actually, Greg, weirdly, I also have noticed that word popping because I'm a very visual person. And when I think of popping, it sounds like throwing, but I always think like, trying to catch it in my mouth. Like, I don't think I've ever really popped anything in my mouth. It's like, I feed
Yeah.
it.
And it probably, it may have very well become an overused term in that because it is very visual and it's
Right.
active,
Right.
but it's just funny. It's like certain words, I think they just get played out because, they become the de facto word.
I'm gonna start gaslighting you and write popping is like the every other word.
I like
Just-
that.
Yeah. Or Liz, you could see it in like she popped up beside him. She popped in the car. She popped out of the, I mean, we could do a lot. My partner in crime, Margaret Pennard, also another author here on the Blaze team, she's saying, think outside the pop.
There
Nice.
you go.
Nice one, Margaret. I love it. I love it. My
Well
friend
done.
Judy's watching. Welcome, Judy from Vermont.
Hi,
Hey,
Judy.
Judy.
Hi, everybody. So Liz and Greg, it is time for the lightning round. Are you ready?
Ready
We'll
as we'll
find out.
ever be. Yeah.
We shall find out. Okay, perfect. So, what is one book that's changed your life?
The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides was one of the books that I try and read it every year, and it changes every year for me. But just in every way, I find that book to be inspiring as a writer, as a reader. Incredible job of like point of view. So definitely that one.
God, there are a number, but I'm going to say Fortress of Solitude, Jonathan Lethem.
That's a good one.
Just because the imagery, the character development, he introduces magical realism in a way that I don't see, just as a young writer, probably the age I was when I read that, it was one of those books that kind of took my head off because of the possibility and the
It popped your head off. Did your head pop off?
Yeah, there you go. Because it's one of those things where you admire something that you want to be able to do, and it was one of those where I went, okay, like I got to figure out how to get my skill sets in order to be able to approach something on that scale.
I love that. I love that. So it impacted you as a person, as a reader, and as a writer.
Yeah, sort of all around.
I love that. I love that. Who's one writer, dead or alive, that you would love to meet?
I think dead, I would love to meet Shirley Jackson.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Before the barbiturates and alcohol. And then Stephen King living, I would like to meet.
That'd be cool.
And that's after barbiturates and alcohol. So like,
he's on the other end of it.
That's fully armed with the barbiturates. What about you, Greg?
Let's see. Dead Toni Morrison.
Yes.
I think it's just as a writer, as what she went through to become a writer, the period that she wrote about from her own experience, seems like it would just be kind of she would just have an incredible story. You know what I mean? And then let's see, in terms of a living writer,
I just answered both. I think was it an or an and?
I guess it was an or.
No, was it both?
Yeah,
I did.
Okay. Yeah.
You could say.
Oh God! Now there's I'm like
There's so
I'm
many.
overwhelmed by choices in terms of that.
The pressure is mounting.
Yeah.
Okay, you are going to mystery writer sleepaway camp. Would you get there? Do you want as your roommate Arthur Conan Doyle or Edgar Allan Poe? You will be in the sleeping bag next to this person.
Doyle.
For
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for so many reasons.
I mean, it would be fun as long as he didn't go down to the wine. but
yeah, but
you know,
I love Poe's writing, but
Yeah.
he was very, he struggled.
sure.
He was, and
Yeah, Doyle would be fun
Doyle
because
would be fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do like a seance in your bunk.
sure.
You could,
Yeah.
just try and stump him.
Well, I was
I
gonna
have
say-
so many questions.
That's the other thing. I feel like with Sleepaway Camp, right? It's all about like, intrigue and mystery and solving that. So he'd be a great person to be able to like figure out
Just how to get out of like camping disasters.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. All right, you're commuting on the way to the sleepaway camp, and you have to pick your car ride partner, your road trip partner. Is it Mary Shelley or Shirley Jackson? And Liz, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Well, have I already gotten to meet Shirley Jackson?
This is a separate trip,
Separate. I think again, Shirley Jackson.
and you're just going to hope there's not a lottery on the way,
Yeah. Yes.
because that wouldn't go well for you.
I'm going to say Mary Shelley.
Okay,
You'll
I
see,
like it.
She seems very prescient
Mm.
in terms of the way she writes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the stuff
You
that
have
she
a
writes.
lot to say about the
What-
world right now.
Well, what is that? Her novel, The Last Man,
Mhm.
which was written in
17
whatever-
Yeah.
whatever it was, and it basically it largely predicted the pandemic that's going on right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, she seems like she's a good travel companion. She can foresee things.
Exactly. Would you rather be stuck in Area 54, which, as you know, is an area in New Mexico ridden with aliens and all sorts of supernatural, terrifying extraterrestrial possibilities? Would you rather be stuck there with H.P. Lovecraft or Bram Stoker?
Ooh. I don't know a lot about Stoker.
I know that. Yeah, I know the sort of.
He probably knows the kill shot. I mean, I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I might go with him actually.
Yeah.
I think I might go with Bram Stoker on that.
Same.
Oh my gosh. What's so your writing has been praised, as I mentioned before, as sharply plotted. People use that word repeatedly, packed with lies, betrayal, so many secrets, twists and turns. What's the secret to writing a book that keeps those pages turning, that keeps the reader up till 3 a.m. saying just one more chapter? Tell us how you did that.
Well, I think largely it comes from the way we try and write for one another, which is that we really try and again, we try and stump one another, and we try and leave cliffhangers at the end of our individual chapters because we're writing chapters back and forth. So part of it is the motivation to the sort of the healthy competition between the two of us as writers, and then also almost as readers. It's like we're writing for each other as readers in a way.
Mm.
Yes, I'm going to have to follow up with whatever happens in her last chapter, but also I'm taking it as I'm reading it with the wonderment of somebody who's reading a novel that I'm really exhilarated by, because she's able to like pull off these turns and flip things and throw in twists at a chapter's end, or a red herring, or a longer story arc, or something that I'm kind of parsing through to figure out where it leads to. So I think part of the way we write it, actually just the mechanics of that, keeps it pretty well paced and kind of slippery, if you will.
I love that.
That's well said. I'm not going to say anything because that was a good answer.
All right.
True teamwork. Kristen saying she loves these questions. Thank you, Kristen. That's awesome.
Yeah.
If you have any, let us know. I try to keep it mystery focused because that's my passion. What's one question you wish I'd asked, or one parting thought for our audience?
Well, I think the one interesting thing about this novel for us that we've realized in the time that we're in is, I think a lot of this happens, you mentioned like present novels. When you're writing something and you don't realize how relevant it's going to be when it comes out or many years later, one of the aspects of In Case of Emergency is this question of the intersection of technology and romance and the relationships that get created virtually. And because we are now in this moment in all of our lives where everything we're doing is on text or email or FaceTime or what have you, it really changes how we relate to each other and how we kind of live in relationships. We tell ourselves about the relationships and what's real, right? So I think one thing that we've found more and more is that there's aspects of this book that are really relatable to this living in now that we had no idea when we were writing it.
When we set out to write it. Exactly.
I love that. Oh, we have one more question from the audience. Other than talking to an acupuncturist, did you do any other interesting research for the book?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, we did. There's an aspect of the book dealing with holistic medicine, uh, different plants and flowers, and how those can be incorporated into treatments, into medical things,
And a lot about plant poison.
and also how they can be in different in wrong dosages can become poisonous. So between that acupuncture stuff, I'm always doing some amount of procedural homework with the detective characters.
Ooh.
But we also have a kind of a running joke that if any law enforcement agency got their hands on our hard drives, it would be, over.
Done.
Because I mean,
Done.
just some of the weird things that you look up,
Right.
Yes.
like
Yeah.
Bodily decomposition. Or,
Right.
Yeah.
if you don't hear from us for a while, we're probably having a conversation in a dark room somewhere with an overhead lamp.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. Well, you two have been an absolute delight. Greg, Liz, known as E.G. Scott, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with us. Thank you to my partner in crime, Margaret, who has been managing things over on Facebook. She is linking to, we have a special partnership with bookshop.org, which of course supports independent bookstores. So our friends can pick up a copy of this fantastic book, In Case of Emergency by E.G. Scott. Here they are, through bookshop.org. Support your independent bookstores. And when we come out of this pandemic, they're still alive and selling books, which we love. Follow these guys on social media, Twitter, Instagram. They're every riveting thought, body decomposition and others. So, and we would love to have you back. People are saying that they are both terrified and excited for your Frankenstein book. So when your next book comes out, please come back. Gail's in Massachusetts. She's saying, thank you so much. Catherine saying, wonderful interview. We have loved having you as always, our top community members, our new friends, Brian in New York, everybody who joined in. Kathleen says, such a great interview. Thank you. It has been such a delight getting to know both of you, and come back and let me grill you some more when your next book comes out.
This has been the most pleasant grilling I've been a part of for a while. So yeah, anytime.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And
Yeah.
thank you everyone who watched.
Wonderful. Thanks. And we'll see you next time on A Mighty Mystery.
Sounds
Wonderful.
great.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.